Patrick Danvers had been away from Ludlow, Maine, for nearly 15 years, and yet the town still managed to pull him back like a nail to a magnet, cold, unwanted, and inevitable. The old maples lining the rural highway bent inward over the road like crooked fingers, their bare branches scratching at the February sky. The frost lay thick in the ditch grass, glittering in the weak sun, and every mile deeper into Ludlow felt heavier than the last. He knew it wasn't just nostalgia. The air itself seemed to have a weight, as if the soil here pressed up against the world from beneath, trying to seep into his bones. He hadn't meant to come back. Not after what happened to his brother. Not after the long nights of screaming dreams and the memory of the thing that had come back in his brother's body. But the phone call had come anyway, on a raw Sunday morning when the snow was falling sideways outside his Boston apartment. "Patrick, it's Judd. I need your help." Judd Crandall's voice had been rougher, older, but Patrick had heard the tremor beneath it. Judd had been the one to try to warn his family, to tell his father not to bury Michael up there on the hill beyond the deadfall. And Judd had been the one to help put him back in the ground after the thing wearing Michael's face had returned. Patrick told himself this was just a visit, one last chance to make peace with Judd before the old man passed. But deep down, a sickness coiled in his gut, whispering that Ludlow had never been done with him. The Crandall place sat back from the road, its clapboard siding weathered gray, the porch sagging in the middle like a tired old man. Judd was on the porch, smoking. His eyes looked sunken, skin waxy under the bristle of his beard. He greeted Patrick with a nod, not a smile. "You look like hell," Patrick said as he stepped up, trying to keep his voice light. "I feel like hell," Judd rasped, taking the cigarette from his lips. "Ain't just the years. There's been trouble. Things stirrin' again." Patrick felt his stomach knot. "Trouble like?" Judd didn't answer right away. Instead, he crushed the cigarette out in a clay ashtray shaped like a moose. "Let's go inside. Got coffee? We can talk there." Inside, the house smelled of old wood, tobacco, and something else, something faint, like damp earth. The wallpaper was yellowed, peeling at the corners, and the floor groaned under their steps. Judd poured 2 mugs of coffee, his hands shaking slightly, and sat across from Patrick at the small kitchen table. "You remember that night, don't you?" Judd asked, eyes narrowing. "After your daddy put your brother in the ground where he didn't belong." Patrick didn't answer. He remembered everything. The way Michael had walked up the driveway, his head cocked just a little too far to the side. The way his voice had been almost right but not quite. The smell that followed him, wet soil, decay, and something sharp, like iron. "Yeah," Patrick said finally. "I remember." "Well," Judd went on, voice low, "it's happenin' again. Someone's been up there. I seen the tracks. And it ain't just folks from town doin' it this time. I think somethin' older's got its claws in us." Patrick frowned. "Older than the burial ground?" Judd's eyes flicked to the window as if the trees might be listening. "The Micmacs didn't just happen to bury their dead up there, boy. They did it because somethin' told them to. Somethin' that was here long before any man. It's in the soil. Been in it since the first roots broke ground. I think it's wakin' up." Patrick tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out flat. "Come on, Judd. You're saying the dirt's alive. I'm sayin' it's worse than alive. It remembers. And it wants." Judd leaned forward, his breath sour with coffee and tobacco. "When you bury someone up there, you ain't just bringin' them back. You're givin' that thing a doorway." That night, Patrick lay awake in the small guest room upstairs, listening to the wind comb through the bare trees. The house creaked and popped as the temperature dropped, and each sound made his skin prickle. He told himself it was just nerves. He told himself the past was the past. But then, somewhere around 2 in the morning, he smelled it. That smell. Wet earth. Cold as a grave. And beneath it, something rotten, sweet, and meat-like. Patrick sat up, heart pounding, and strained to listen. The house had gone dead silent. No wind. No settling boards. Just the slow rasp of his own breath. Then came the sound of footsteps in the hall. Soft. Dragging. Too slow to be Judd's. The guest room door creaked open just a few inches. Moonlight spilled through the crack, outlining something tall and thin standing there. Patrick froze. His mind screamed don't look, but his head turned anyway. A face peered through the gap. It wasn't Michael's. But it was wrong in the same way. Skin stretched too tight over bone, eyes glittering like dark stones, lips split in a grin that was all teeth and no warmth. "Pat," the thing whispered, voice wet and bubbling. "You came back." The door slammed shut so hard the frame rattled. Patrick scrambled to the lamp and flicked it on, but the room was empty. The smell lingered for a few seconds longer, then faded like breath on a mirror. Judd didn't seem surprised when Patrick told him in the morning. "Figures," Judd said grimly. "They know you. Soil remembers you same as it remembers me. You're marked, boy. Always been." Patrick tried to push down the rising panic. "Who was it? What did I see?" Judd's gaze dropped to his coffee. "Could be anyone buried up there. Could be something wearin' a face you ain't seen yet. But it ain't your brother, that much I know. He ain't comin' back again." Judd paused, then added, "unless somebody's stupid enough to dig him up." Later that day, they drove out toward the old deadfall. Snow had melted into slush along the edges of the path, leaving the earth dark and wet. The forest felt wrong, too still, like everything in it was holding its breath. When they reached the clearing before the massive wall of fallen trees, Patrick stopped cold. There were tracks in the snow. Big ones. Not quite human. The toes were too long, the heel narrow and deep, like something heavy pressed it down. "Christ," Patrick muttered. "What made those?" Judd's face was pale under his cap. "That ain't just one of the dead. That's something from the other side." Patrick looked at him sharply. "The other side of what?" Judd turned toward him, eyes hard. "The other side of here. The place they come from. And if something like that's walkin' this far down, then we're in worse trouble than I thought." As they turned back toward the truck, Patrick heard it again, that wet, dragging step behind them. He spun around, but the path was empty. Just bare trees and snow. But as they climbed into the truck, Patrick caught sight of something in the rearview mirror. For just a second, far back among the trees, there was a figure. It stood too still. Its arms hung too low. And it was smiling. Patrick blinked, and it was gone. That night, Ludlow's single streetlight flickered and died. Somewhere out in the dark, a dog began to howl, and Patrick could have sworn he heard another voice join it, a voice that was almost human, but not quite. And far up on the hill beyond the deadfall, the cursed soil shifted under the moonlight, breathing like something alive. Something that had been waiting. The morning after the streetlight died, the snow came down heavy, thick, wet flakes that muffled every sound in Ludlow until the whole town felt buried under a white shroud. Patrick sat at Judd's kitchen table, watching the snow swirl beyond the window. Judd was at the counter, pouring whiskey into his coffee without trying to hide it. Neither of them spoke for a while. It wasn't just the weight of what Patrick had seen in the mirror. It was the way the silence in the house felt different now. Not empty, listening. Judd finally broke it. "You still think you can walk away from this?" Patrick didn't answer immediately. He thought about Boston, about his life there, his job, his small apartment, the nameless women who came and went without asking too many questions. But when he tried to imagine leaving, it was like picturing himself trying to walk out of a room with no doors. "I don't think I've got a choice," Patrick admitted quietly. Judd grunted, taking a long drink. That's the truth, boy. Soil's got your scent now. And it don't forget. Patrick leaned forward. You keep saying that, the soil. What is it exactly? You mean the burial ground? I mean what's under the burial ground, Judd said, turning to face him. You seen a tree grow, you seen roots, right? They dig deep, spread wide. Well, imagine the whole damn forest up there is one thing. And its roots are in the earth, and in us. It don't just take the dead and twist them. It remembers everything that's been buried there since the first poor bastard laid a body in that dirt. Every face. Every voice. Every scream. Patrick shivered despite himself. And now it's, awake. Judd's eyes were bloodshot but sharp. Awake, hungry, and madder than hell. I think something, or someone, stirred it up. And if it gets strong enough, the ground won't need folks to do the burying anymore. It'll do the talking itself. That afternoon, the snow eased up just enough for them to drive into town. Ludlow was quiet, as it had been for years, just a scattering of houses, a small gas station, the general store, and the old church whose bell hadn't rung since the fire in '62. People they passed didn't wave. Some stared. A few looked away quickly, like they didn't want to be seen by anyone connected to Judd Crandall. At the store, Patrick picked up supplies while Judd talked with Bill Parker, the store's owner. Patrick caught snatches of the conversation, words like missing and last seen by the river. When they stepped back outside, Patrick asked, "Who's missing?" Judd's jaw tightened. "Tommy Bledsoe. Kid's only 17. His ma says he went out hunting 3 nights ago and never came home." Patrick frowned. "And you think?" "I know," Judd cut in. "Ain't the first time someone's gone missin' this way. And if the ground's actin' up again, it sure as hell won't be the last." That night, the thing came closer. Patrick woke to a faint scratching sound at the window. At first he thought it was just tree branches swaying in the wind, but there was no wind. He got up slowly, heart thudding, and pulled the curtain back. Something stood in the snow just beyond the reach of the porch light. It was tall, but hunched forward, its arms hanging so low that the fingertips brushed the ground. The snow came up past its shins, but it didn't seem to feel the cold. Its skin was mottled, gray and blue like frozen meat, and where its face should have been there was only a smooth sheet of pale flesh, except for the mouth. The mouth was wide, much too wide, and split open in a jagged grin. No eyes. No nose. Just that gaping smile. Patrick stumbled back from the glass, his breath coming fast. The thing tilted its head as if it could see him anyway. Then it began to move, slow at first, dragging those long arms through the snow. Its mouth opened wider, and Patrick heard it. A voice. Not loud, not even fully formed, but it knew his name. Pat, Rick. It was enough to jolt him into action. He grabbed the baseball bat from beside the bed and ran to the hall. Judd was already coming up the stairs with his shotgun. "You see it?" Patrick gasped. Judd's expression was grim. "I smell it." They reached the front door together, Judd kicking it open and raising the shotgun. The yard was empty. Just snow, smooth and untouched, except for a set of deep, narrow tracks leading back toward the woods. Judd lowered the gun slowly. "Ain't no deer makes tracks like that." Patrick stared into the dark tree line, his skin crawling. "What the hell was that?" Judd didn't look at him. "That, boy, that's the kind of thing that comes walkin' when you keep the wrong kind of door open too long." The next morning, they followed the tracks. The woods were quiet, no sound but the crunch of snow under their boots. The tracks wound deeper into the forest, past the deadfall, and up toward the burial ground itself. Patrick felt it before he saw it. The strange hum in the air, the pressure in his skull like the drop before a storm. When they reached the burial ground, the snow there was melted away, exposing black earth that steamed in the cold air. And there, in the center, was a fresh mound of dirt. Patrick's stomach dropped. Someone buried something here. Judd stepped forward, kneeling to touch the soil. His face twisted. Not something. Someone. Patrick swallowed hard. Who? Judd looked up at him, and there was real fear in his eyes now. Tommy Bledsoe. Patrick felt sick. You think that thing I saw could be him already? Could be something else wearing his skin. Either way, boy, he ain't gonna stay up here. Not if the ground's hungry. They were halfway back to the truck when Patrick heard it, a high, thin cry that froze him in place. It was coming from somewhere to their left, deeper in the woods. At first it sounded like a child, but the longer it went on, the less human it seemed. Judd heard it too. Don't, he warned, but Patrick was already moving toward the sound. The crying stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Then, from the shadows between two trees, something stepped out. It was Tommy, or at least it had been. His eyes were sunken pits, his skin stretched tight and torn at the corners of his mouth from smiling too wide. His clothes were shredded, smeared with dirt, and his fingers were black under the nails. He tilted his head at Patrick, and when he spoke, the voice was wet and doubled, as if someone else were speaking just under his own. You came back. Patrick took a step back. Tommy. You remember me, Patrick, the thing said, and its grin widened until the skin split at the edges. Blood trickled down its chin, steaming in the cold. I remember you. We all do. Judd raised the shotgun. That ain't Tommy anymore. The thing turned its head toward Judd, grinning wider still. Hello, Judd. We've missed you. It moved fast, too fast for something half-frozen. Judd fired, the blast tearing through its chest, but it barely staggered. Patrick grabbed Judd's arm, pulling him back, and they ran for the truck. Behind them, the thing screamed, a sound like a man and an animal screaming together, layered over each other. And under it, Patrick thought he heard something else, something deeper, like the voice of the soil itself. They didn't stop until they were back at the Crandall house with the doors locked and the curtains drawn. Judd poured 2 fingers of whiskey into each of their mugs and slid one to Patrick. You see now. Judd said. Ain't just grief or foolishness bringin' folks up there. It's the ground itself, whisperin' in their ears. Promisin' them something they ain't meant to have. Patrick stared into his drink. And you think it's only starting? Judd nodded slowly. Boy. I think Ludlow's got a reckoning comin'. And when it gets here, it ain't gonna matter who's alive or dead. The ground'll take 'em all. That night, Patrick dreamt he was standing on the burial ground, the soil pulsing under his feet like a heartbeat. Hands were pushing up through the dirt all around him, hands of people he knew, people he didn't, hands with too many fingers, hands made of roots. They were reaching for him, pulling him down, and as he sank into the earth, he heard the voice again. Pat, Rick, we're waiting. He woke with a start, the smell of wet soil in his nose, and knew without a doubt that something was standing just outside the house. And it wasn't alone. Patrick lay still in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence outside. He knew better than to move too quickly. If you moved, they noticed. That's what his father had told him when Michael had come back, don't let it see you first. The trouble was, whatever was outside tonight already knew exactly where he was. The boards in the hallway creaked. Slow, deliberate steps. Then, nothing. Patrick's skin prickled as he slid out of bed, grabbing the baseball bat again. He inched toward the door, ears straining. The smell came first, wet soil, cold stone, and underneath it, the faint sweetness of decay. He'd smelled that on his brother, on the night he'd stopped being his brother. He opened the door a crack. No one was there. But the carpet bore footprints, bare, damp, and leaving smudges of black mud. They led toward the staircase, vanishing halfway down as if the walker had simply sunk into the floor. By morning, Judd was already up, his face pale under the morning light. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "They're gettin' bolder," he said. "They ain't supposed to come this close without an invite." Patrick poured himself coffee, wishing his hands didn't shake. "And why is that happening now?" Judd hesitated, then sat down heavily at the table. "Because it knows we're thinkin' about stoppin' it. Soil's got ways of defendin' itself. And it don't like old ghosts bein' stirred." Patrick frowned. "Old ghosts?" Judd stared into his coffee for a long time before speaking. "Back when I was a boy, me and some friends, we thought we were clever. Thought we'd figured the ground out. We were wrong. We didn't just wake up the dead. We woke it." Patrick leaned forward. "The thing you've been talking about?" Judd nodded slowly. "Ain't got a name I can tell ya. The Micmacs had one, but I ain't speakin' it. Name's like a knock on a door, it'll answer." Patrick felt a chill creep over him. "What happened?" Judd's eyes seemed to cloud over, his voice going low and flat. "Summer of '49. Me, Bill Hanlon, and Danny Fuller, 3 dumb kids who'd lost people. My dog, Bill's uncle, Danny's sister. We'd heard the stories, sure, but we wanted to see for ourselves. Brought Em up there. Buried Em in the hard ground. Thought we were gettin' Em back." Patrick's stomach nodded. "And they came back." Judd's hands tightened on the mug. "But something else came with Em. First it was small things, shadows where there shouldn't be, voices whisperin' at night. Then animals started dyin' in ways that weren't right. Not killed. Not eaten. Just opened up. Like the ground was practicin'. Patrick's breath caught. "And your friends?" Judd's gaze darkened. "Bill hung himself before summer was out. Said he couldn't take the dreams anymore. Danny went missin' one night. My daddy found what was left of him at the edge of the deadfall." Patrick didn't ask for details. He didn't want them. They decided to visit the burial ground again, this time in daylight. The snow from yesterday had melted back, revealing more of that steaming, black soil. The air up there felt thick, hard to breathe, as though each lungful carried something alive with it. Judd stopped at the edge. "You feel that?" he asked. Patrick nodded. It was like a low hum, just under the edge of hearing, vibrating in his bones. "That's it talkin' to ya," Judd said. "Only question is, what's it sayin'?" Patrick swallowed. "Feels like it's waiting." Judd gave a grim smile. "That's how it starts." They didn't linger. Judd knew better. As they started back toward the truck, Patrick caught sight of something half buried in the snow by the tree lean. He knelt and brushed the slush away. It was a photograph, old, water-warped, and nearly faded. In it, 4 people stood in front of the old Ludlow schoolhouse. He recognized a much younger Judd instantly. Beside him was a boy about Patrick's age, grinning. Behind them, faint but unmistakable, was a shadow. It wasn't cast by any of the people. It loomed taller than the building, a twisted shape with arms too long and no head, its outline blurred like smoke. Patrick's fingers went cold. "Judd, who took this?" Judd came over, and for a moment the old man's face looked as if all the blood had drained from it. "Where'd you get this?" Patrick pointed. "It was in the snow. Right there." Judd took the photo carefully, like it might burn him. "Boy, this ain't possible. I burned every one of these." Patrick stared at him. "Why?" "Because," Judd said, eyes still fixed on the shadow, "the damn things kept comin' back. That night, Patrick dreamed again, but this time it wasn't the burial ground. He was standing in the middle of Ludlow, but the town was wrong. Every building sagged, the wood blackened, the windows gaping like open mouths. Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, and with each one that touched the ground, something twitched beneath the surface. He looked down and saw the soil moving, swelling like something underneath was pushing up. Then, one by one, hands broke through, human, animal, and stranger shapes that didn't belong to anything alive. They reached for him, clutching at his legs, pulling him toward the ground. From somewhere behind him, a voice whispered, "You can come home, Patrick. All you have to do, is say yes." He woke with the taste of dirt in his mouth. By mid-morning, they had another problem. A woman came up the drive, middle-aged, pale, eyes red from crying. Judd recognized her immediately. "Ellen Bledsoe," he muttered to Patrick. "Tommy's ma." She didn't waste time on greetings. "Judd," she said, voice tight, "I think I saw him." Judd's jaw clenched. "Where?" "By the river," she said, glancing around like someone might overhear. "It was just after dark last night." He was standing there, but, he didn't wave. Didn't move. "I called his name, and he smiled." Her face crumpled. "That smile wasn't my boy's." Patrick felt cold wash over him. "You didn't go to him, did you?" She shook her head. "Something in me said not to. I ran. But he's out there, Judd. And I can't," her voice broke. Judd put a hand on her shoulder. "Ellen, you listen to me. If you see him again, you run the other way. Don't speak to him, don't touch him, and for God's sake don't follow him. You understand?" She nodded, but her eyes were far away, as if part of her was already hearing that hum from the soil. That evening, Judd pulled something from his shed, a small wooden box, old and scarred. Inside were a bundle of photographs, a knife with a bone handle, and a leather pouch filled with dark, powdery dirt. Patrick raised an eyebrow. "What's all this?" "Old tricks," Judd said. "Micmacs taught my daddy some ways to keep the ground at bay. Won't stop it, but it might give us time." Patrick studied the knife. "And if it comes to that?" Judd met his gaze. "If it comes to that, you don't hesitate." The snow started again after midnight, but it didn't fall evenly. Patrick watched from the upstairs window as it seemed to avoid certain spots in the yard, swirling away like smoke. And in those bare patches, the soil shifted. Something was trying to come up. Patrick turned to wake Judd, but stopped. There was a figure in the doorway. It wasn't Judd. It was his brother. Michael looked exactly as he had the night he'd come back, same crooked head tilt, same dirt-streaked face. But his eyes were different now. Deeper. Hungrier. "Pat," he said, and his lips curled into a slow, wet grin. "It's not so bad, down there." Patrick gripped the baseball bat so tightly his knuckles ached. "You're not him." Michael's smile widened. "No. But he's still here. We all are." And then, without taking a step, he was closer, right in front of Patrick, the smell of earth and rot choking the air between them. Patrick swung the bat. The thing vanished before it connected. He didn't sleep again that night. Outside, under the snow, the ground kept breathing. And it was breathing faster. Patrick hadn't slept in 2 nights, and it was starting to show. His eyes burned, his hands trembled, and his thoughts came in jagged bursts. The house itself seemed to pulse with the same restless rhythm as the soil outside, like they were both waiting for something. Judd noticed. "You keep goin', without sleep, you'll make yourself easy pickins," the old man said over breakfast, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. Patrick took it but didn't drink. "I can't close my eyes without seeing it." Judd nodded grimly. "That's the point. It gets in your head first. Makes you too tired to fight when it finally comes for you. Patrick hesitated. Then maybe we stop waiting. Maybe we take the fight to it. Judd gave a dry chuckle. You don't take the fight to the ground, boy. It's already under you. That afternoon, Judd took him out past the edge of town, down a snow-covered logging road Patrick had never seen before. They walked until the trees thinned and the land began to slope downward toward a ravine. A frozen stream wound through it, its surface cracked like old glass. Judd stopped at a twisted pine whose roots clawed out of the earth in thick tangles. He crouched and brushed the snow away from the base, revealing a black opening barely big enough for a man to crawl through. Patrick frowned. What is this? Judd didn't look up. One of the roots. Patrick thought he meant the tree until Judd pointed into the hole. That ain't just dirt down there. It's part of it. The ground under Ludlow ain't just sittin' still, it's spreadin', like a vein or a root system. This here's one of the ways it moves. Patrick crouched beside him and peered in. The air that came out was warm, wrongly warm, and carried that same smell of damp soil and something faintly metallic. The darkness inside seemed thicker than shadow, as if it had weight. Judd lit a lantern from his pack and pushed it into the hole. The light reached maybe 10 feet before being swallowed entirely. How far does it go? Patrick asked. Judd's voice was low. Farther than Ludlow. Farther than you want to know. And down there, it's louder. Against every instinct screaming in his head, Patrick followed Judd into the hole. The walls were damp, the air heavy. Roots jutted from the dirt, some slick and pulsing faintly as if they were veins. The deeper they went, the more Patrick could hear it, a low hum, like the sound of blood rushing in your ears, but threaded with something almost like voices. They weren't speaking in words he understood, but he could feel their meaning, hunger, grief, and a promise of reunion that twisted in his gut like a hook. The tunnel opened into a chamber big enough for them to stand in. The floor was nothing but wet soil, and in the middle of it lay bones, human, animal, and things Patrick couldn't identify. The bones were arranged in spirals, each one pointing inward toward a black pool that shone without reflecting the lantern light. Patrick's throat went dry. What is that? Judd didn't move closer. The heart. One of them, anyway. This is where it feeds. Patrick stared at the pool. The surface shifted, but it wasn't from water, it was soil, moving like liquid. Something pale drifted up toward the surface, breaking through for a moment. A hand. Thin, long-fingered, nails black and curved. It flexed once, then slowly sank back down. The voices in Patrick's head grew sharper, clearer. We know you. We've held you before. We can give them back. All of them. Patrick staggered back from the pool. It's talking to me. Judd's jaw tightened. Don't listen. It'll tell you exactly what you want to hear, and it'll make you think you're making the choice yourself. The soil in the pool began to bubble. Something large shifted beneath it. The hum became a vibration under Patrick's feet, rattling his bones. Then the surface broke, and it began to rise. At first it looked like a mass of roots, dripping with soil. Then the shapes resolved. Arms, torsos, faces. Dozens of faces, some human, some animal, all stretched and distorted as if they were trapped in the thing's skin. Their mouths opened and closed soundlessly, but Patrick could feel the words in his head. Stay. Feed. Be whole. The thing reached toward him, and Patrick stumbled back, tripping over a bone. Judd grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the tunnel. The air in the chamber thickened, the smell of rot so strong it burned Patrick's throat. The soil beneath their feet seemed to shift, trying to pull them down. Move. Judd barked. They crawled back into the tunnel as the walls trembled. Roots lashed from the dirt, snapping inches from Patrick's face. One of them grazed his arm, leaving a smear of black mud that burned cold against his skin. They burst out into the snow just as the opening behind them began to collapse, the earth swallowing it whole. Patrick lay in the snow, gasping for air, his arms still burning where the root had touched him. Judd stood over him, shotgun in hand, scanning the tree lean. "It knows you now," he said. "Knows your scent. That touch. That's a mark. You're in it for good." That night, the dreams came harder. Patrick saw his father, standing in their old driveway, waving. But when Patrick ran to him, his father's face peeled away, revealing the pale, eyeless grin of the thing in the snow. Behind it, the ground split open, and hands poured out like water, pulling him under. When he woke, the mark on his arm was worse, the skin gray, veins dark as ink spreading from the spot. Judd took one look and swore under his breath. "It's tryin' to pull you under without buryin' you. That's new." Patrick's voice shook. "So what do we do?" Judd didn't answer right away. "We find the other roots. We burn them. Might not kill it, but maybe we can slow it down." Patrick glanced toward the window. Snow was falling again, but this time it wasn't just white. Mixed in were flecks of black dirt, drifting down over the yard like ash. And in the middle of the yard, just at the edge of the porch light, stood his brother. Grinning. Patrick didn't remember getting home. One moment he was running through the fog-thickened streets of Ludlow, the pounding in his ears matching the rhythmic crunch of his boots over frost-hardened ground, and the next, he was standing in the kitchen, staring at a coffee pot that wasn't on. He was soaked in sweat despite the biting November air outside. His fingers trembled against the chipped enamel counter. Something had followed him home. He could feel it. The house was too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator seemed distant, like sound swallowed by thick cloth. Shadows clung to the corners, darker than they should have been. He knew better than to think it was just his imagination. Ever since the cemetery, nothing felt like just imagination anymore. When the knocking came, it wasn't a sound so much as a weight. 3 slow, deliberate thuds against the front door. Pause. Then another 3. Patrick's skin prickled. Whatever, it wasn't the mailman. It wasn't a neighbor checking in. He stepped forward, each move feeling like walking through water, the hallway stretching out longer than it had ever been before. The glass pane beside the door was black, no sign of movement outside. Then, faintly, a whisper. "Patrick." The voice was wrong. Too slow. Too wet. Patrick's stomach dropped. He knew that voice. It was Claire. But Claire had been dead for years. She had been buried deep, and unlike others in Ludlow, she hadn't been the type to wander back from the other side. Or at least, Patrick had thought so. He had made peace with it, the accident, the funeral, the empty space she left behind. Now she was outside his door. "Patrick. I'm cold. Please." The words slurred together like her tongue was too heavy in her mouth. He backed away, heart pounding. "You're not her," he whispered to himself. His voice cracked. "You can't be." The doorknob began to turn, slow and steady, metal squealing in protest. Patrick grabbed the nearest thing he could, a rusted fireplace poker from beside the wood stove. He stood there in the middle of the hallway, knuckles white, as the knob turned fully and the door creaked inward. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it the smell of turned soil, rot, and something faintly metallic, blood. Claire stepped inside. Or what was left of her. Her skin was stretched thin and gray, like paper left out in the rain. Her lips had split, revealing teeth stained dark, and her once bright eyes were dull yellow marbles swimming in black veins. Her hair hung in damp, tangled ropes over her shoulders. But the worst part, the part that made Patrick's knees buckle, was her smile. It wasn't a smile of love or recognition. It was hunger. Patrick, her head tilted unnaturally to one side, a low pop sounding from her neck. You miss me, don't you? He shook his head, forcing his feet to move backward. You're not Claire. You're something else wearing her face. She stepped forward. Her bare feet left faint, wet marks on the wood floor. Don't be cruel, she whispered. I came back, for you. She reached out with hands that looked like they'd clawed their way through earth and stone, nails broken down to jagged shards. He swung the poker hard, catching her shoulder. The sound it made wasn't human, more like hitting a sack of wet gravel. She barely flinched. Patrick stumbled backward into the kitchen. Stay away from me. You brought me back, she said, voice shaking with something like amusement. Even if you didn't dig, you wanted me. You thought about it. Her words cut deep, because they were true. After the cemetery, after seeing others return, he had imagined it. Just once. Just to see her again. He had buried the thought as quickly as it came, but in Ludlow, thoughts had weight. Sometimes more than actions. She lunged. Patrick slammed the poker into her chest, the tip punching through something soft before hitting bone. She hissed, a sound like steam from a cracked pipe, and grabbed the rod with both hands. The cold of her flesh shot through the metal, into his bones. You can't hurt me, she growled. You're part of me now. We all are. Before he could pull back, her face was inches from his. Her breath was the smell of decay and grave dirt. Then she whispered a name he hadn't heard in years, his brother's name. The shock made him hesitate, and she took that moment to shove him against the counter, hard enough to rattle the dishes in the cupboards. His ribs screamed in protest. He shoved her away with everything he had, sending her stumbling into the kitchen table. She hit the wood with enough force to split it, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silence. For the first time, she snarled, and in that snarl he saw something beneath her ruined features, something older, more terrible. This wasn't Claire. It never had been. The front door slammed open again, and this time it wasn't the wind. Judd stood there, shotgun in hand, eyes grim. Get down. Patrick dropped, and the blast tore through the thing wearing Claire's body. It staggered but didn't fall, black fluid spraying from the wound. Judd pumped the shotgun again, muttering something under his breath, words Patrick didn't understand, but that made the air seem to vibrate. Claire screamed. Not in pain, but in rage. Her voice cracked into something inhuman, something that rattled the windows. You can't stop it, Judd. The ground remembers. The ground wants. She lunged for Judd, but he was ready. Another blast, and this time her head snapped back, half her jaw disintegrating into a spray of bone and dark meat. She collapsed in a twitching heap, her fingers curling like claws before going still. Patrick scrambled to his feet, shaking. That wasn't her. Judd looked at him with the weariness of someone who had seen too much. No, boy. That was never her. You think the ground gives back what it kept in the dark. It wears the faces of those you love so you'll let it closer. Patrick's eyes drifted back to the corpse on the floor. It didn't look much like Claire anymore. The skin was sloughing away, revealing something else beneath. Something with too many teeth in the wrong places. Something that smiled even in death. Judd grabbed his arm. We need to burn it. Now. Before the ground calls it back again. Patrick nodded, though his legs felt like they might give out. They dragged the body out into the frozen night, to the fire pit behind Judd's truck. Patrick's breath came in clouds, his stomach roiling with every jolt of the corpse's weight. The moon hung low, fat and red, and the wind carried whispers he couldn't quite catch. As the flames caught, Claire's body convulsed, mouth opening wide enough to split the skin at the corners. From inside came a sound that was neither scream nor roar, but a mixture of both, a voice that carried the weight of centuries. Ludlow belongs to us, it hissed. And so will you. The fire roared higher, drowning the voice, but Patrick knew the words weren't gone. They were inside him now. Judd stood silently, staring into the flames. This ain't the first time something's come back meaner than it went down. Won't be the last. Patrick swallowed hard. Then how do we stop it? Judd looked at him, eyes hard. You don't. You fight it as long as you can. But the truth is, the ground's older than any of us. It remembers everything. And sometimes, he kicked at the dirt. It takes more than just the dead. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks into the night. Patrick didn't ask what he meant. Deep down, he already knew. That night, Patrick couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house felt like footsteps. Every shadow seemed to stretch just a little too far. And when he finally drifted off, he dreamed of the cemetery. Only this time, the graves were open, not empty, but waiting. And all of them were smiling. The rain had been falling for hours, turning the paths through the woods into black rivers of mud. The cursed ground of the Micmac burial site had soaked up the water like it was feeding, the soil breathing, yes, breathing, beneath the surface as if some immense thing shifted under it. Patrick knew the sound by now. It wasn't just the wind or the groan of sodden trees. It was movement. The earth here didn't rest. Judd's flashlight beam cut through the dark, the old man's breath ragged as he pushed forward, the wet leaves crunching beneath his boots. Beside him, Patrick felt the temperature drop. Not a natural chill, but the cold of something wrong. The air felt thick in his lungs. Even the rain seemed to fall slower here. We're too late, Judd said suddenly, his voice hoarse. It's already awake. Patrick swallowed hard. What's already awake? Judd didn't answer right away. He stopped, scanning the darkness, before finally turning to Patrick with a look that was both fierce and terrified. The ground, Judd said. The ground itself. This soil's always been cursed, but sometimes it remembers it's hungry. They came to the edge of the burial site. The stones stood like crooked teeth around the perimeter, slick with moss and glistening under the rain. Patrick's stomach tightened, he could see the disturbances in the earth, the recently turned patches where something had clawed out. But there was another area, a wide, circular mound, where the ground pulsed ever so slightly, like the slow heartbeat of some buried leviathan. The memories came rushing back, his brother, the accident, the long nights wondering if there was a way to undo the loss. The temptation. The same temptation that had brought him here before, like so many others. Judd, Patrick said, his voice low, I think I understand now. It's not about bringing people back. It's about letting this thing spread. Judd nodded grimly. It tricks you. Makes you think you're in control. But every time someone buries their dead here, the thing below gets stronger. It doesn't just send M back, it keeps a piece of M. Twists the rest. Before Patrick could respond, a wet sound came from the mound, like mud suctioning open. The surface split in a jagged line, and something pale and thin pushed upward, clawing for the air. Patrick's hand went to the hatchet on his belt, but Judd grabbed his arm. Don't touch it, Judd hissed. You touch it, it knows you. The thing emerged further, its head slick with soil and rain. It wasn't human, not entirely, but it wore a human face like a mask. The features were stretched, lips too wide, eyes milky but fixed directly on Patrick. The rain streaked down its face in rivulets, but its mouth opened and released a deep, wet gurgle that was almost words. Patrick. Patrick stumbled back. His breath caught in his throat. That's. No, that's not. It's what it wants you to believe, Judd said sharply. The creature clawed free, dragging itself onto the wet grass. Its arms were long, too long, ending in blackened fingers with nails like split glass. Bits of bone jutted through the skin. The more it moved, the more its face seemed to shift, cycling through different features, men, women, children, as if it was trying on identities, searching for the one that would break Patrick's resolve. Then it found one. His brother's face. Patrick felt something collapse inside him. His vision tunneled. He'd seen the coffin go into the ground years ago, the weight of it lowering into the earth. He'd seen the body. But now here it was, his brother's smile, faint and trembling, like he'd just woken from a bad dream. I knew you'd come back, the thing whispered, though its lips barely moved. Patrick's hands trembled. He took a step forward without realizing it. Judd's voice cracked like a whip. Don't. That ain't him. That's the ground talkin'. You go to it, you're done. The creature cocked its head. Its mouth curled in a grin, but the skin at the corners split, revealing gums lined with jagged, gray teeth. Don't listen to him, it said softly. You wanted this. We can be together again. Patrick's breath shuddered. The memories of laughter, of shared secrets, of the last night they spoke, they crashed into him like waves. But then, he saw the truth beneath. The thing's eyes didn't blink. Its chest didn't rise with breath. The rain slid over it without sinking into the skin, as though it were painted flesh. I buried you, Patrick said slowly, his voice tightening, and I cried over that grave. You didn't come back. This isn't you. The thing's smile dropped instantly. The face began to sag, like wet clay under a heat lamp. Beneath it, something else, something black and skeletal, pushed forward, splitting the false skin. A long, sharp hiss escaped from a mouth that now had no lips at all. It lunged. Patrick swung the hatchet instinctively, the blade biting into the thing's shoulder. No blood came, only a stream of thick, black fluid that smelled of rot and stagnant water. The creature shrieked, but it didn't recoil, it surged forward with impossible speed, knocking Patrick onto his back. Its hands clamped around his throat, fingers cold and strong enough to bruise instantly. Its head was inches from his, that shifting face still glitching between shapes, his mother, his brother, a stranger, Judd's younger self, even his own face. Judd was shouting, but Patrick could barely hear over the blood pounding in his ears. His vision blurred. The rain became a cold curtain above him. Then, somewhere deep in the soil beneath them, something laughed. Patrick's mind went white-hot with terror. This wasn't just one thing. This was a piece of something much bigger. Whatever it was watching through this puppet. With a surge of desperation, Patrick wrenched one arm free and jammed the hatchet upward, burying it in the thing's neck. The creature let out a howl that shook the trees, its grip loosening enough for Patrick to shove it off. It fell back toward the mound, convulsing. As it twitched, the ground seemed to open for it, swallowing it back into the pulsing soil. The slit in the earth closed behind it with a wet suck. For a moment, only the rain and Patrick's ragged breathing filled the air. Judd crouched beside him, his lined face pale. You see now, he said quietly. You bring something back, you're just giving it a body to wear. That soil don't care who you miss, it just wants more. Patrick sat up slowly, his throat aching where the creature's fingers had pressed. His mind was still reeling, but beneath the fear was a burning anger. This thing's been here since Ludlow began, he said. It's not going to stop, is it? Judd's gaze drifted to the dark mound. His voice was grim. No. And the worst part? It's got more than one way out. Patrick stared into the black trees, where the shadows seemed to move against the wind. Somewhere, far off, he heard another sound. Something dragging through the wet leaves. Not from the mound this time. From outside the burial ground. It wasn't just here anymore. And if Judd was right, the thing in the soil was only getting started. The night in Ludlow was darker than it had any right to be. No moon, no stars, Only a sky that seemed to sag and breathe, as if the heavens themselves had been pulled into the curse festering in the earth. Patrick stood at the edge of the pet cemetery, his breath clouding in the unnaturally cold air. His hands ached from gripping the shovel. Beside him, Judd's gnarled silhouette trembled in the gloom, a shotgun in his hands. The ground beneath them was whispering. Not like wind, not like animals, but like the dead. Names slid through the dirt in muffled voices, dragging themselves up from graves that weren't graves at all. They called Patrick's name, over and over, each voice a perfect mimicry of someone he'd loved. His mother. His childhood friend. And most chilling of all, his own voice, low and rasping, promising him that the end would be quick. Judd spat into the soil, as if the act could insult it. "Don't listen to it, boy," he said, though his own voice trembled. "It's been Cal and me for decades. It knows every soft spot you've got." From the far side of the burial ground, the first of them emerged. It was Hannah. She had been dead for weeks now, buried after the accident that had taken half her face. But the thing walking toward them was something else entirely. Her ruined flesh had mended in places, though not naturally, the skin had knit like it was pulled taut over something too large, and her mouth smiled wide enough to split at the corners. Her eyes were wrong, like two shards of polished coal with no whites, and they locked on Patrick with an intimacy that turned his blood cold. "You came back for me," she whispered, her voice carrying in the stillness as if spoken into his ear. "I knew you'd come." Behind her, others shambled forward, men, women, children, people who had been in the ground for years, decades, maybe longer. Their bodies showed their time beneath the earth, but they all moved with that same uncanny, patient precision, as though the bones beneath their skin had learned new ways to move. Patrick tightened his grip on the shovel. "They're not real," he muttered. "They're not them anymore." Judd took a step forward, lifting the shotgun. "That's right. They're meat-wearin' memories. And they ain't gonna stop till the soil's had its fill." The earth trembled. Graves split, stones tipped and fell, and a black, oily seep began to bubble up between the cracks. It smelled of rot and something older, like a crypt that had been sealed for centuries. Patrick's stomach turned, and his vision blurred. The whispers in his head were growing louder, he could hear not only the dead, but the earth itself. It was hungry. And it was patient. Hannah reached him first. She stopped just inches away, tilting her head like a curious animal. Her breath smelled like damp soil and decay. "Patrick," she said sweetly, "why do you resist? We can be together again. No more pain. No more loss. Just us." When she reached out to touch his face, Patrick swung the shovel. The blade connected with her neck, a wet crack splitting the air. Her head lolled, but didn't detach, it simply rotated too far, snapping back into place with a sickening pop. Her smile widened, blood dribbling from the corner of her mouth. The other resurrected ones closed in. Judd fired. The blast tore through one of the corpses, sending black sludge spraying across the gravestones. But where the pellets tore flesh, the wounds writhed and sealed, not with healing but with the intrusion of something from inside, a black root-like growth knitting them back together. Patrick realized then that it wasn't just the dead, it was the earth itself animating them. They weren't just walking corpses, they were extensions of the cursed soil, puppets moved by something ancient and merciless. The ground buckled beneath his feet. A fissure split open, nearly swallowing him whole. From within it came not only darkness but movement. Thousands of tiny pale hands, wriggling upward as though the soil had given birth to them. They clutched at his boots, his legs, dragging him downward. Judd grabbed him by the collar, yanking him free. "We can't fight it here. We need to burn the root." Patrick's heart slammed against his ribs. "Where?" Judd's face twisted. "Under it all. Beneath the old stones. That's where it sleeps." The two of them tore through the burial ground, weaving between toppled graves and half-risen corpses. The whispers grew into a cacophony, each voice trying to burrow deeper into their minds, promises, threats, and worst of all, truths they didn't want to believe. Patrick's dead father's voice told him he was just like him, weak, afraid, doomed to make the same mistakes. His sister's voice laughed and said she liked it better where she was, and that he'd join her soon. They reached the center of the old burial ground, where a massive, jagged boulder jutted from the soil like the spine of some dead god. It was covered in symbols, not carved, but formed naturally in the stone, the shapes shifting subtly when Patrick tried to focus on them. "This is it," Judd rasped. "We get under it, we kill it." "How?" Judd lit a flare, the crimson light painting his face in hellish tones. "By feed in it fire." Patrick wedged his shovel under the edge of the stone, levering with all his strength. The ground groaned in protest, a sound so deep and low it vibrated in his bones. The boulder shifted just enough for a stench to roll out that nearly made him vomit. Beneath it was a hollow space, the soil there darker than night, pulsing faintly like the surface of a living thing. They didn't get the chance to think. The dead surged in from every direction, their movements no longer slow but unnervingly fast, their joints snapping in unnatural angles to close the distance. Hannah was at the front, her eyes locked on Patrick like a predator's. Judd jammed the flare into the hollow, and the soil reacted instantly, it screamed. Not metaphorically. The ground actually emitted a sound, high-pitched and wet, like metal tearing underwater. Black tendrils shot upward, wrapping around Judd's legs and dragging him toward the opening. Patrick grabbed him, pulling with all his strength, but the old man's voice was already fading. "Don't let it take you too. It never stops." The tendrils yanked Judd into the hollow, and the boulder slammed back down, sealing it. Patrick was left alone. The dead surrounded him. Their eyes all turned black, their mouths moving in unison. When they spoke, it was the voice of the earth itself, deep and resonant, rumbling through the soil and his bones. "You cannot stop what has always been. You cannot kill what hungers without end. You are ours, Patrick. You were always ours." Something inside Patrick snapped, not in fear, but in grim resolve. If the soil was hunger, then maybe it could choke. He swung the shovel again and again, cutting through the tendrils that shot toward him. He tore open the boulder's edge once more, the smell almost knocking him unconscious. He reached into his bag and pulled out every flare, every piece of accelerant they'd brought, and he shoved it into the hollow. The earth thrashed beneath him, the graves buckling and collapsing. He struck a match. The fire roared into the hollow, and the scream that followed shook Ludlow to its foundations. The ground heaved violently, tossing Patrick into the air. He landed hard, his vision swimming. Around him, the dead convulsed, their bodies splitting open as black smoke poured from them. Hannah's mouth opened in a silent scream before her body collapsed into a heap of soil and bone. The burial ground burned. Patrick staggered to his feet, barely able to stand. The flames climbed unnaturally high, black and red and gold, and the screaming continued, fading only when the boulder cracked down the center and crumbled into dust. And then, silence. Patrick stood there for what felt like hours, the fire dying to embers, the air heavy with the smell of scorched earth. He knew it wasn't over, not really. Fire might slow it, but hunger like that didn't end. When he finally turned to leave, he saw Judd standing at the edge of the trees. His skin was pale, his eyes sunken, and his smile too wide. "Good work, boy," Judd said, his voice low and wrong. "But the soil don't just hunger. It waits." Patrick's blood ran cold. Judd was dead. And yet here he was, back again. Behind him, the shadows moved.